Hey everybody, in this video we're going to be covering something called the twist stance. This is a super cool stance. It is a transitional movement. You'll see it very seldom where we stand still with it. However, you'll be practicing it that way to make sure that everything is in the proper position. The great thing about this stance is that it's designed for generating power. Now that's not going to make sense when you see it at first, but just watch. I'll show you. That's why we got Mr. Bob here to help me out today. All right, so the twist stance is this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lead leg and I'm going to put it in front of me. I'm going to angle it between 30 and 45 degrees off of my center line. Okay, so if going forward is center, then 30 and 45 degrees this way is what I'm looking for. I'm going to take my rear leg and I'm going to put it out 30 to 45 degrees at an angle behind me. Sometimes, depending on what you're doing, you may actually put it at a full 90 from your direction of facing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this left leg here and I'm going to set it behind me. Now, you see that I've got a bit of an angle here on both feet. This one's going here, my rear one's going out to the side. I'm going to turn sideways so you can see that. Here I am, 30 to 45 degrees. Again, it depends on what I'm doing with it. And then approximately 30 to 45 degrees here. Okay, now the neat thing about this particular stance is that it's actually more stable than it looks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shin of my leg that's in back and set it against the calf of the leg that's in front. Okay, so this allows me to lock everything in and just kind of hang out here. This doesn't actually require a huge amount of balance. It does require some leg strength, specifically on the lead leg. You're not really going to have your weight back on this. In fact, you want 90% of your weight to be on your lead leg. You do need to be careful with this. If you have knee or hip injuries, be careful as you're starting to practice this. Don't try to go for like a super deep stance, okay? The next thing you need to think about is your upper body. We always want to try to maintain shoulders over hips here. What I don't want when you go into this stance is to be forward, okay? It's not a curtsy, all right? We're not curtsying for the queen here, okay? Instead, we want to keep our head up, all right? As we turn our feet in and we set this down, we're keeping everything aligned. Shoulders, hips, and then down through the knees, we're keeping everything aligned. We want some spring in this so that we can move quickly. Now, hands are going to move depending on what you're doing. Sometimes you'll be in a strike. Sometimes you'll be preparing for something. So it just depends on what you're about to do. Now, we call this a stance, but all stances are transitional. So I don't want you to think about getting to this position and standing here. Okay? What we're actually doing is moving through to another technique. Okay? In one of our forms, we do have a finishing move that stops here. But very seldom do we have that in actual combat. What we have is, hey, I'm moving something and then moving around it. So I'm moving through this stance, whether I'm going in front or whether I'm stepping behind. Okay? Let me show you those two differences there. In Korean, they have two different names for a step in front or a step in back. So I'm going to show you the two different movements here. If I'm taking my lead leg and stepping in front, okay, that's one kind of version, but everything ends up the same way. It's just that I've put the other leg behind me, okay? If I'm stepping in back, I'm moving that direction. I'm kind of almost turning my hip toward my direction of travel, whereas when I step in front, it's pretty sideways, okay, pretty direct. Now let's talk about how we use this to generate power. When I do this, essentially what I'm doing is I'm loading up the spring of my legs, okay? So I'm allowing them both to bend, but I'm not loading them for a vertical jump. The body's really good at doing that just by squatting down and then jumping, okay? What I'm actually doing is I'm loading up for a linear force. Maybe I'm using a side kick, maybe I'm using a round kick, maybe I'm actually doing this so that I can then rotate out into something else, okay? But in this particular case, I'm going to go linear. So we can do a side kick, boom, okay? We can maybe do a skipping side kick, boom. We can even do a slide up side kick, and those are great. What happens with those is that as we're coming in, our back foot leaves the ground, okay? So it actually somewhat limits the ability to put force into the target. What we're going to do with this twist stance is we're going to step. We're here in our fighting stance, right? We're going to step behind, boom, and we're actually going to point our heel toward our target here. You see how everything's nice and connected here? Depending on how much distance I need to cover, I may do a small step or I may do a larger one. But I'm starting to aim my rear end at the target so that I can fluidly step through with an incredibly powerful side kick because I'm allowing this foot to step behind and then drive me out rather than skipping, stopping as the other leg kicks. So The twist stance is used to develop power or to move quickly, sometimes even with rotation. All right, guys, there's your twist stance. A great way to practice this, as silly as it seems, is just to do the grapevine. If you don't know what that is, it's just step in front, step out, step behind. So essentially, we're just doing twist stances all over the place, okay? So boom, boom. You can even just sit here and go back and forth. Just do a little dance. Do a little dance, okay? You actually see a similar stance to this in things like capoeira, where they do what's called the Jenga, where they turn, boom, and they make these big movements. But our twist stance is much smaller. All right, guys, there's your twist stance. Practice at home. Maybe have a little fun with it. Put some music on or something. We'll see you guys in the next video.